Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Lincoln Project Town Hall Series. I am Lisa Senecal, and tonight I am joined by Jeff Timmer, who is also one of my Lincoln Project compatriots, and Maya May as well, who is both with us, both on the at the Lincoln Project, and also we co-host We're Speaking Together. So wonderful to have you both here tonight.
It's good to be here. We're about to save democracy, so I'm fired up. I had a lot of coffee today. Let's do this.
Yeah, my balanced diet in October of even-numbered years consists of coffee, vengeance, and spite, and that's fueling me right now. So.
I think that hits all three of the important groups. So that's all you need. So this town hall series the Lincoln Project's been doing, focusing on the key states that are must-wins for not just Democrats, but for democracy in these midterm elections. So Michigan, Wisconsin, Nevada, Pennsylvania, and tonight we are talking Arizona. It is going to be our focus for the full hour because there's a whole lot going on in Arizona, and 50% of it is crazy.
Yeah. At least, yes.
Yeah, and it's true. The polls coming out of Arizona are so tight, and we saw how close the election was in 2020, the narrow win by Joe Biden, but we also saw the incredible lengths that the crazies went to try to destabilize and undermine the faith in the results of that election. And I think we just need to expect more of that because they actually have those people who were undermining the 2020 election on the ballot this year in Arizona.
Yeah, and the GOP has all eyes on Arizona right now because they're sending people in full force to help campaign. I mean, even have like the moderate Republican, Youngkin, going in and campaigning for people in Arizona. It's like, what's happening? I think even Tulsi Gabbard.
Yeah.
Tulsi, exactly. So they're paying attention to Arizona. We need to pay attention to Arizona. Getting out the vote is really key and crucial right now. We can't get distracted by all of the antics. It's about getting out the vote, which is why it's amazing that we do have some of our grassroots organizers with us today, because early voting has already started. And do we have numbers yet from Arizona? I don't think we do. Like as far as how.
Well, yeah, I don't know. Maybe our guests might know a little better about that. I just know that they can request mail-in ballots up until October 28th. So that deadline is approaching, but you still have more than a week to request your ballot and make sure it gets back in.
Spread the word to your friends in Arizona, y'all.
Right, but make sure those mail-in ballots, they have to be received by November 8th. And we know that the U.S. Postal Service is a little jacked.
Just a little slow.
Been a real effort to make sure that doesn't function quite the way it's supposed to. And I have a feeling it only gets worse close to the midterm. So make sure if you're in Arizona, you get your mail-in ballots and turn them right back around. There's just no reason to have it sit on your counter for a few days. Fill it out, get it to a drop box. Apparently you're going to be able to have your picture taken and video while you do that. We'll talk about that tonight. But yeah, get those back because November 8th is the deadline for receiving them. It's not like taxes. It can't be postmarked on the date. It's got to be there by the date.
And no extensions. All right. So
and make sure that you don't leave any errant bamboo fibers on your ballot because that's a big sticking point. So.
And with that, let's I think we should bring in our union partners. As you know, the union, everybody we have so many different grassroots partners who are on the ground. And so it's so great because they have the information that we truly need to understand what's happening and how everyone around the country can help, regardless of whether they're in Arizona or in Wisconsin. We all can pitch in. So we'll start with Jean Woodbury is here, Interim Executive Director of Equality Arizona. Jean, can you just give us a quick overview on your organization and what you're doing in Arizona?
Absolutely. So Equality Arizona is an LGBTQ plus rights nonprofit, and we're really focused on getting LGBT people in Arizona involved in civic advocacy and giving them the best value that we can give them as voters or candidates. So right now, one of our big things that we have going is our voter guide. This is making sure people have all the information they need to vote safely and securely, and to understand what's at stake and what everything means, especially, coming from an LGBT perspective, how these things can affect our rights. And obviously, there's a lot at stake for us as a community.
Yeah, the anti-LGBTQ contingent of the Republican Party feels like it's the entire party. Happy Spirit Day, by the way. It's Spirit Day, everyone. That's glad. It's like an anti-bullying campaign for the LGBT community. So I didn't have anything purple. Otherwise, I'd be wearing purple to celebrate Spirit Day. But
Your background's purple.
I know, we're backgrounds purple. Exactly. That counts, right? I should have turned the lights purple. And then we also have Kathy Sigmund from Civic Engagement Beyond Voting. Kathy, could you just give us a quick overview of your organization?
Yes, absolutely. We started in 2016 as a group that sought to engage people in their state government. So a lot of our activities focus around the Arizona State Legislature, which is a level of government that allows ordinary people to have their voices heard. So we have been growing and growing. We are an entirely grassroots group, and we get very involved in getting people to vote and to understand, again, what is at stake. So we're very excited to be talking about Arizona on the down ballot side, not just the sort of marquee races, some very important issues and people on the ballot this year.
Absolutely. We'll talk more about that down ballot stuff, because a lot of us were at that top level and we're paying attention there, but not to these other races that are driving a lot of what's happening, in particular at the local level. So thank you for that, Kathy. And then last but not least, Tim Castro, senior strategist at the 1865 PAC. Can you give us a quick overview of your organization?
Sure. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. 1865 literally just started right after the insurrection, and we realized why 1865. It's when our democracy and our republic were trying to fight for realigning it after the Civil War. And we really kind of see again that we're looking at an opportunity window that could really fragment our republic again, more so than it is now. And so this election really is, we're on the edge, on the cliff, and we're hoping that we can fight for the middle candidates that can bring common sense back to our voting. And alluding to down ballot, we just heard today in Arizona that we had Attorney General and Department of Justice complaint filed for voter intimidation. So we're already seeing that Arizona is going to be a hotbed of activity.
Yeah, Lisa, you mentioned that up top. We should talk about it.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of clips of video of folks who are taking video and taking photographs of people dropping off their ballots in drop boxes. Tim, can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so we have a very public, if you recall in the 2020, we had a large group of individuals heavily armed, basically chanting in the parking lot of where the Maricopa County Recorder Office is. And I think a lot of people found out, hey, the voting boxes are going to be there. So they set up shop legally 300 feet away. And they're just filming folks saying that they're not intimidating. But in this particular complaint, somebody was called a mule and was approached by somebody with the camera. So that's what the complaint is saying. And of course, here in Arizona, we have a lot of people who are just quoting 2,000 mules as justification for these actions.
Well, and I don't think I'm sorry, go ahead, Tim.
Well, I was just, I don't think we can, we need to take these actions like we're seeing these vigilante actions by radicalized people in Arizona. We've heard reports of them in Michigan and Wisconsin and other states, especially states where there's like open carry laws and people standing there, maybe 300 feet away, 100 feet away, whatever the law is in that particular state, but with rifles strapped to their back. I mean, talk about intimidating. Yeah. I mean, it's only going to take, some little spark to set off the tinderbox that's just waiting. It's dry and it's waiting to burn here, and it's a really dangerous scenario.
Yeah, voting should not be something people are afraid to do. In particular, I think this affects marginalized communities more than anything else. Jane, are you hearing that people are feeling fearful for being able to get out the vote? What is your organization as far as like being able to have conversations with people about this? Like, how is it affecting them?
You know, I definitely do hear some fear about voting, but I think more than that, I just hear fear from people that their vote won't make a difference. You can vote safely by mail, and I think a lot of voters recognize that. But I hear from people in districts where they feel like they don't have a voice because of how that district is districted. And that can be a scary thing when we're looking at some of the potential outcomes for the next legislative session. There's states that are proposing just complete bans on drag, for example, which there's no way to write a law that does that, that basically doesn't just outlaw being trans in public. So people have real fear about the outcome and real fear that their vote doesn't matter. And I think that's the thing to really communicate, is that no, there actually are a lot of places where your vote can make a difference and it is safe to vote by mail.
Yeah, I'm glad you talked about what's happening in state legislatures, because Kathy, you mentioned the down ballot races there. This is where so much of it happens, is within the state legislature, and even at the local level, the school board level. What are you seeing in Arizona happening in those races?
It's interesting. There's a lot of passion around the school board races. And one of the things we have seen is in the war of the signs. Now, I don't know if you've driven around Arizona during an election, but every street corner is an absolute, huge cluster of campaign signs. And there are a number of reports that we keep a very close eye on, that people illegally put up signs defaming candidates. And that has been particularly true on the school board level this year. So it has been really, really vicious around some of the perfectly normal school board candidates that our grassroots groups are supporting. So it is really shocking, but we have hope that these are signs that they're not going to motivate people. We have seen that across the country in other school-related elections, that people are not really moved by that type of smear.
Yeah, the divisiveness is real on the school board level. And Jeff, this actually, we usually think about like the bigger races driving turnout. And so this is quite a question for both you, Jeff, and Kathy, is, are these school board races pushing turnout in Arizona more so? And so are we expecting to see more of the extreme right voters getting agitated and excited to get out to vote because of what the divisiveness we're seeing?
I was going to say, I think we're seeing in states across the country where this assault on school boards with these made up crises that the alt-right and these far-right Republican-backed candidates are bringing to these school board races are something. They're really designed to inflame passions and fear among people, and nothing gets people in communities more agitated than fear about what's going on in their schools. So I do think there's great potential for kind of a reverse, seeing that small local issues or smaller local races are helping drive into the turnout in these larger state that will affect larger statewide races.
Mm-hmm. We're also watching really closely the superintendent of public instruction race, which is, we have an incumbent, Kathy Hoffman, who is a Democrat who's running for re-election and has been extremely competent, but has been absolutely vilified by the far right. Running against her is an old sort of Paul, who has been accused of sexual harassment, and he has been banned by the FEC from ever trading stocks because of fraud. He is not the sort of person you would ever want near your child's school, and we have seen that race become very tight, and that is utterly terrifying.
Unfortunately, those things that you just described, Kathy, sound like some of the real selling points for GOP candidates these days. Absolutely the opposite of what we should be looking for in candidates. Let's jump into the governor's race a little bit. Another margin of error, incredibly tight race. Maya mentioned at the top that we've got folks from around the country, Glenn Youngkin, Tulsi Gabbard coming in and doing events. Are you seeing the bringing in big names from outside the state having a real impact? I'll direct that to you first, Tim.
I think, well, the Republican Party in Arizona has done an amazing job at fear-mongering mail-in ballots. So we're already seeing that has suppressed. This time last year, or last cycle, they just released a number that were 90,000 votes under where we were at this time last year, or last cycle, when the ballots were dropped. So I think we're seeing the Trump came into town. We're seeing that base of the Republicans get really excited, but they're not going to the polls. They're going to wait for day of to go and vote. So that's an interesting tactic to spend so much energy to energize and then tell them, hey, hopefully you voted in November. And on the Democrat side, I think we've just been really good at turning in our ballots. So we already see that we're probably going to, again, like 2020, see our ballots go in, have higher numbers, and then election day is just going to be an absolute 50-50 to see who comes out.
The folks holding off coming out until election day seems short-sighted. It didn't pan out that well in 2020. I'm surprised that they seem to be continuing to tell the Republicans are continuing to tell their voters not to use mail-in voting, because that used to be Jeff, didn't that used to be a thing? Like, that was a Republican thing, right? Mail-in voting early. That was,
but you can't.
Yeah, absentee voting, mail-in voting used to be something that the Republicans were known to be, or thought to be, better at than the Democrats, and it was something that we always relied on back in my Republican days, being able to bank those votes early. But now it's something that's going to feed into. I don't know exactly how in Arizona, and maybe our guests can enlighten us, how they process and report the totals. But in many states, that's what we saw in 2020, how they report and process the day of votes early, and that's what created that red mirage where it looked like Republicans had leads that then eroded over time when all the votes were in by the deadline, and it's just when they're counted and when they're reported. But it's going to feed into the narrative that the Republicans are looking at when they lose close races like Carrie Lake, when she loses by a small amount, or Blake Masters or Mark Fincham. They're going to say, see, they're stealing the election. And it's going to feed into the optics that will fuel the crazies on the right.
Right.
Lisa, I would just say I beg to differ in terms of how it turned out in 2020, because a lot of people voted for the top of the ballot, but down ballot, Democrats absolutely took a bath. We lost so many, really great candidates, people who absolutely we expected to win. Our county recorder in Maricopa County, Adrian Fontes, who is now running for Secretary of State. That is when he lost his seat. And it was all the later votes. I believe they processed the mail-ins first and then the day of, because what we saw was people day by day losing. So it was a very brutal and discouraging process. And one of the things we struggle with in the Democratic Party, I think, is convincing people to not just vote the top of the ballot. There are so many people who just don't vote down ballot, whereas Republicans are a lot more in the habit of just going top to bottom, and voting for everybody that has an R by their name. So those are, I would say, some of the biggest issues that we see sort of on the horizon. Anecdotally, we do have a lot of people saying they got their ballots late, or they just received them, or even that they haven't received them yet. So even though we are dramatically short of where we were 2 years ago in terms of mail-in ballots, it could be that they will, we'll see that curve go up.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about the Senate race in a second, but before we move on from the governor's race, it seems to be somewhat, I mean, obviously polls right now are very confusing post Dobbs. It seems to be, very confusing, but Lake is slightly up, and just really incredibly curious if what you're seeing on the ground, are people feeling disheartened by the fact that those numbers are up. I mean, this was a woman who also said she wouldn't even accept the results if she were to lose. So how is that affecting the people that you are talking to? I'll start with you, Jean, and anybody feel free to hop in on this one.
I've heard from a few people that they're not sure they would stay in Arizona if Kari Lake wins. I think that's totally understandable. There is a real fear there. And I think that ties in to everything we were saying about the people she has around her and the people she brings in from out of state, and a lot of the rhetoric about mail-in voting. Whether or not it works out as an electoral strategy, it's something that stirs up a really terrifying group of people, and that suppresses the hopes of people just trying to live their lives. It's a fear campaign that will have an impact regardless of whether she wins. So it's a really concerning thing.
Yeah, it's incredibly concerning. I have friends in Texas who, who were thinking about fleeing, being like political refugees within their own, country, basically, because of these laws that are being enacted, these anti-trans laws. And so when you have a candidate like this on the ballot, and you're out there, and I know, Kathy, you are very much, it's about beyond voting. What is being done on the ground to spread the messaging that this is so mission critical to people who are marginalized, who may have to leave the state if we don't have Democratic wins across the board?
Well, one of the things, I mean, we are a year-round organization. We are not just activated in an election year, but a lot of politics has to do with building in the off year and, politicking in the on year. So we are a group that focuses on the legislature. We do that whether it's an election year or not. And it's part of the way that we draw people into understanding that their state government is very important. One of the things that has been impressed upon me over and over again is that this is not a short-term project. This is not an election that we're going to win and then be able to go home. As Jean was saying, a lot of these emotions are being activated. And once activated, they don't go down immediately. And we have certainly seen that in the past 6 years, that once people have that worst part of themselves awakened, it doesn't just turn around and go back in the box again. So we are looking ahead and working on how we continue to build our operation after the election, whatever the outcome. And Jean, I cannot tell you how many times I've been tempted to just throw in the towel and, just say I can't take this anymore. But I feel Arizona is, such an interesting state, and being, so much on the edge, and so many really wonderful people here. I just feel that we have to get beyond the sort of the superficial campaign slogans. So whatever the outcome of this election, we are certainly going to continue our work in a lot of different ways on the ground. I don't know if that answered your question, but
I mean, I think it's important that people do understand that it is year round. That is a good message that people do need to hear. And you mentioned it, once you bring out the worst in people, it's kind of out there. What I like, Tim, is that you came to, you decided to start your organization, and it kind of brought the best out in you, what happened when you saw January 6th. And so I'd like to keep things optimistic in that right now, it is bringing out the best in a lot of people. Empathy, again, where we're realizing we need to fight for people that deserve to have a good life, just like every other United States citizen. Like, we're really trying to do that. I think we can move on to the Senate race. We're ready to move. Does anybody, any last words on the governor race?
Speak now or forever hold your tongue.
I just wanted to add, when it comes to Hobbs and Lake, Carrie Lake has been a newscaster and been in people's rooms for 15, 20 years. And I've heard so many times, oh, but I trust her. Oh, but she gave me the news. And it's a big educational leap for people to say, well, just because she's a newscaster doesn't mean she's a great governor. And we've seen that sort of conversation where the whole debate, should Hobbs and Lake debate, took the entire campaign. Hobbs chose not to debate, and Lake made that the issue. And we, speaking at the doors to folks, were like, no, who cares if they didn't debate? Let's talk the issues. And I think that is really impacting this race, because the more, all polls, the more people learn about each candidate, they swing to Hobbs' way. But unfortunately, this very superficial race, Maya, to your point, is debating if they should have had a debate.
Yeah, it's been disheartening to see that people have so much trust in Carrie Lake because she did deliver the news. But there was a time when we trusted people who gave us the news because we assumed they were somewhere. They might have their biases, left, right, center, but we assumed that for the most part we were getting the truth with maybe a more conservative or more liberal spin on it. So trying to overcome that with people who still have that faith, which I wish we all could have, but with people like Carrie Lake, you just can't. But it does seem like it was the right decision for Hobbs. I'd like to hear what you folks think about it. It seems like it was the right decision for her not to debate Carrie Lake, because how do you debate somebody who is going to lie the entire time? They're just not tethered to reality at all. So you spend your whole time trying to argue against people who are throwing out fiction.
Billy Joel said it best: never argue with a crazy man.
Watching the primary debate was really a lesson in how to take over from the host by Carrie Lake. And I would certainly think that I would wish, I should say, that people have had enough of TV personalities and the idea that they can actually govern, because she has zero experience in governing. And Katie Hobbs is, she's been a legislator. She was president of this, or minority leader in the Senate. She's been Secretary of State. She has shown enormous strength fighting back against the election lies and defending the vote in Arizona. And I would hope that people can see beyond the slick sort of television personality. We hope.
Well, that's the work that you're doing on the ground. And so that's why we're so grateful that you are doing it, because it literally does take, they're hammering their message home. It takes us doing the same over and over again. All right. Lake Masters, Mark Kelly, the Senate race.
I'm just going to say one thing. If I had a friend that was a billionaire that, I could just look to for one source and just have him hand me millions and millions of dollars, I'm not sure I would pick a Senate race that highlights just how insane I am as use of that money.
Lots of things you could do with that money without proving to everybody that you're crazy.
Yeah, that this race is closer than it is. I think, Kelly's been trending ahead since day one, I believe. And Blake just went to his buddy and said, hey, I need some more, 10 million, 15 million. And it just comes to him. So I like Kelly's chances. I think in Arizona, we feel that he's got this one. But the absolute asinine spending of Blake Masters and his friends is something to behold.
Yeah, Peter Thiel seems to be putting a lot of money behind terribleness. And when you're out there on the ground, Kathy, do people see how money is affecting the race? And do they talk about it, or is it not something that it's at top of mind?
Well, it's really interesting because there's a proposition on the ballot that would stop dark money in politics. It's called, Stop Dark Money, or Stop Dirty Money. And the person who is behind that, Terry Goddard, who is a former attorney general, if I'm not mistaken, this is his fourth time trying to get it on the ballot. And he finally succeeded. I think it is extremely likely that it's going to pass. A similar ordinance was passed in Tempe, which is the Phoenix suburb where I live, and it passed by 91%.
Wow.
So I think there's every indication that that's going to pass, and that has certainly brought some recognition that people want this to stop. There's more awareness of who is paying for these campaigns.
That's really interesting because I was reading today that once Peter Thiel stopped, post primary, he really cut back on the contributions he was making to Blake Masters, and Masters is having a real hard time raising money from actual Arizonans. Jeannie, is that reflective of who you think Arizonans really are, and that it is this dark money that's having such a huge impact in the state?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Mark Kelly campaign and all of the apparatus around that has really been one of the most impressive, I think, political machines from the actual will of the voters in Arizona in a very, very long time. And there's nothing like that with Blake Masters. No one likes him. No one likes him as a person. Everything that's happening with Blake Masters is because of Peter Thiel. I don't know that it's really accurate to characterize it as dark money. I mean,
right, it's right out there.
Yes.
And that's the case around the country. I think that really naming that is important. Peter Thiel is someone who sued an independent news outlet into the ground. Gawker Media.
Oh, he was the guy that sued Gawker?
He was the Gawker guy,
Yep.
I remember that. Didn't realize that was Peter Thiel. Okay.
He's funding candidates who are basically just like the cancel culture crowd of people who you always have to hear from, but complain they're not being heard. Whether it's J.D. Vance or whoever, but he's picking a certain kind of cultural set of people to run for Senate in these critical races. And fundamentally, it doesn't have anything to do with who those people are. It's just him trying to pick some kind of person in his orbit that he can push through the system. And it's not going to work in Arizona.
I'm really glad to hear that.
Well, yeah, it would seem that, Mark Kelly from outside Arizona looks to be running a very smart campaign that kind of sets aside partisanship. He's not running as, I guess, what people would say as a textbook Democrat. He's running more on his own personal brand and identity and independence, and hopefully he'll be able to open up a wide enough margin on over these next few weeks to help kind of set the pace for other pro-democracy candidates who happen to be Democrats in Arizona to succeed. The better that Mark Kelly does, the logic would go, the better that Katie Hobbs will do, and that Adrian Fontes, and the better the chances of flipping the chambers, either of the chambers or both of the chambers in the legislature.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but we're feeling like Mark Kelly is going to be fine. That's what we're feeling. I just want to have that happy note.
As long as the votes come out.
Yeah. Well, we've talked a lot about the fear and the concern, and that's something that the Republicans in Arizona are fueling. And I think we need to remember there are more of us pro-democracy Americans than there are of them. And intimidation and fear is a bully tactic that they're relying on, whether it's intimidating people at the drop boxes or making people fearful about whether or not they can continue to live, a life free of harassment in Arizona. Yeah. They're only going to win if we let them. And we need to be confident. We should be concerned. We should be. Everybody should be concerned because these races are close. But act confidently. Mm-hmm. And make sure that we push these races across the finish line.
Yes, turn on your affirmations if you need to. We will win this election. We will. Go to those affirmations.
The Kansas referendum was not that long ago, so we. Have a little bit of swagger. Democrats can do this. We do have the numbers, and come at it not with overconfidence, but with confidence, because absolutely, Jeff, there are more of us than there are of them. That what I think we have to really be concerned about is there are multiple people on the ballot in Arizona right now, and across the country, who are election deniers. And if they are elected, if they win these races, they have very specific plans for how they are going to make sure in 2024, having the numbers doesn't necessarily mean that you win any longer. Tim, can you talk to us a little bit about that? Because there are really three races. The AG, the Secretary of State, and the governor all have a huge impact on how the elections are run.
We just heard today that there was a Fincham video that he was recorded saying, I'm not saying I'm not going to deny the election. I'm going to send it to the legislature to decertify the election. I can't do it as Secretary of State, but I can make sure that it happens and make sure that it's presented in our House. So I think you've got some tremendous, you just cannot figure out what is it that you're going to accept, and at what point will you accept it? We have that entire top ticket of the Republican Party. Fincham today, I do believe Trump won. So it's this incredibly bizarre hardwiring of individuals that you just got to say, there's no way I can convince you. And Jeff, to your point, we Arizona, to win a statewide, you need to break off some of those independents and the moderate Republicans. Our independent party is the largest in Arizona, then followed by Republicans, then by Democrats. So when we're trying to play the middle, and it's not even the middle anymore, it's common sense lane. I don't know what you call it, but it's like, yeah, you know what? What are they going to do election night? And hopefully Maya will affirm it in that we win and democracy wins. What does that next 24 hours look like is something that I'm just waiting to see what happens.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, we have some audience questions that I definitely want to get to, but since we're on the topic, I want to really talk about the issues Lisa brought up, the abortion ban and Kansas's referendum. So I want to talk about the issues a little bit and how they're affecting Arizonans. So a lot of people retired to Arizona, for example. And so Social Security on the chopping block. Are you hearing anything, Kathy, when you're out there? Is this a part of the messaging now, is letting people know that this is something that the Republican candidates would be completely okay with letting, and they flip-flop on it, right? So it's like they say one thing and then they erase their website and then they change the thing. Are people seeing this game that's being played?
I think people are coming from a place of their own convictions. And when we're at doors, and we do a ton of knocking on doors, we talk to people who often say, I'm voting all D, right down the ballot. So there's a lot of that partisanship, but we also like to draw them into conversations about, well, what is most important to you? And it is not always abortion or women's rights. Sometimes it's education. Sometimes it's water, for example, huge issue this time around. We find that people actually love to connect on some of the school board candidates, on their legislative candidates. Sometimes they don't want to hear so much about the top of the ticket people. They feel so much more connected with the people who are representing their communities. And that is how you have to find the way in. To talk to them about a subject that's meaningful to them. And it has been some of the most uplifting, I think, time that I've had is knocking on doors and just talking to voters and seeing what's on their mind. So it's not always abortion, but generally, I mean, people are steamed about it.
And what about like Social Security? Because that does feel like it would be a hot issue right now if potentially people were to lose it. Or
my impression, and I'm on Social Security, my impression is that has really not percolated down to people's consciousness yet. And I think that that's a conversation that's being carried on, at the national level. And I have not really seen people activated. Now, I could be wrong, but I have not seen that filter down to people.
Mm-hmm. I'm like, everybody right now, tell the people.
Security and Medicare, these things matter, and it's your money.
Yeah.
There are so many threats, it's hard to focus.
Mm-hmm.
True.
Yeah.
We've been under Arizona Republican leadership, and for a long time, the narrative was our state surplus. We have a massive state surplus that Ducey just refused to deploy and refused to invest in education, invest in anything. I mean, he just kept it in, and that, we're seeing the Republicans do this fear mongering. Oh, Democrats are going to come in and their liberal wish list, right? And it's interesting that they're arguing against themselves because they're saying Arizona is in such a terrible state, and the invasion is going to continue when they have been the ones under leadership. They're the ones that have been steering this ship for quite some time. And so, record be damned, I'm the solution. So.
Yeah, Jeff, as a former Republican strategist, this act of saying something that's wholly untrue, how can people in Arizona, we've got our organizers here, I'm like almost like, can we do a quick little master class? What kind of messaging can they take to the people that they're interacting with in these final, because we got like 19 days left, I believe.
Sure. Well, I mean, I think it's important to try to concentrate on the issues that are going to be most motivating to turn out the most number of people. There's such the breadth of the assault and the breadth of the danger is astounding. Whether it's people's individual constitutional rights, whether it's money that they've paid, Social Security and Medicare, for instance. There's democracy. How do you, if we're talking about everything, we're not really, nobody's hearing anything. So I think it's really important to focus the at least the 10,000 foot conversation, not necessarily the conversation you have at every door, but to focus that conversation on those issues kind of that will most quickly cut through the crap that the Republicans are peddling. If they're complaining about the environment or the state of things in Arizona, you're right. I mean, they've run Arizona for most of the last half century. And so, they're pointing the finger at themselves, but they can do it because they don't have any, hypocrisy doesn't matter to them. Winning does, power does.
Mhm.
And so we need to focus on the truth, but we need to never be afraid to just keep punching them in the mouth and hit them where it's going to hurt them the most.
Metaphorically speaking, everybody, before you
Yes,
try to
not encouraging
that
actual violence.
as what I mean metaphorically, always good for a good throat punch.
Yeah.
Big fan of that.
Well, and just to add to this down ballot, what we're hearing at the door, Arizona recently just had, we have Maricopa County, largest county in Arizona, the Attorney General, Maricopa County Attorney's race. They did an absolutely horrendous racist attack against her campaign manager, which I've also never experienced in my work is, let's attack the campaign manager in such a vile and disgusting way. And so they went to Mitchell, who's the opponent against Julie Gunnigal, and she says, well, that's a shame, was her response. And this was a fabricated, horrible, racist, everything throwing at it attack. That's a shame. And no accountability. Jeff, to your point, it was like, okay, move on, next one. It was just
God, that's so disappointing to hear that the amount of vitriol that's out there, the willingness to openly, actively discriminate and attack marginalized folks, members of minority group. It's just shocking the degree to which that's happening now. But you also have a Supreme Court justice who there's an effort, vote no to retain him effort. And he sounds like he kind of fits in with all of that. He's been accused of engaging in sexual harassment and discrimination. He has no interest in sentencing reform around marijuana, which, as we know, disproportionately has had an impact on people of color. And so again, my question is, there's that piece of it, and there's the individual right piece that Jeff just mentioned as a way to talk about these things, that we do have these inherent rights. Jeannie, are you seeing an effective conversation happening that pulls in people beyond marginalized groups so that everyone is understanding that all of our rights are on the table? I mean, they're talking about contraception. It goes beyond abortion rights and trans rights and, treating people of color equally. It's going to hit all of us. If they haven't come for you yet, they will.
Yeah. Appeal to the selfishness in people at this point.
Yes, absolutely. Whatever it takes.
Whatever it takes.
Well, I think the challenge of answering that is the people who are directly affected by all of these things make up a really substantial majority of society anyway.
Mm.
So what you're kind of looking at is this connecting with people who aren't as affected? And I think in some ways that conversation is happening. There's a lot of people who aren't directly involved in every single issue, but they're sick of the direction things are headed. And I hear people saying that. I hear those conversations. They've had whatever reason it is that they voted the way they voted for however long they've been voting. And now they're just looking at a candidate like Andy Biggs and saying, no, stop the train. I want to get off. So I do see a really general conversation and shift in the conversation towards a little bit more sanity.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of, WTF going around when I look at some of these candidates. And I do also hear that from a lot of, independents or former Republicans. It's like, yeah, you can't continue to endorse this insanity. So I'm hoping we're going to be surprised on November 8th and discover that, oh my God, empathy does exist. Crazy affects everybody. And so therefore, even if it's not altruistic, people are done with the crazy train. I'm ready to be off the crazy train. That's for damn sure. there are a couple of propositions in Arizona that are on the ballot. We talked about a couple of them. I think we have time for at least a couple of those, and we do want to get to some of the audience questions. So gonna jump on this one really quickly. Prop 132. It's a constitutional amendment to require a 60% vote for voters to pass ballot measures to approve taxes. That doesn't sound sexy at all. Is that getting people out? Like, what? Like, is that going to affect turnout? Like, is that getting people motivated? How'd they get on there?
When people understand what the what the ballot initiative is, they always seem to be written in ways that you have to like read them 17 times before you can understand if you should say yes or no.
Yeah.
Well, one of our specialties is to explain things to ordinary people. So we have, I think the way to wrap these various propositions up, it's 128, 129, 132, and 309. There are 4 propositions on the ballot this year that ask voters to give away their own rights. And that is one of them. So the legislators have been attacking our constitutionally protected initiative system in so many creative ways. I really do give them points for creativity. And these are 4 different ways to attack the way we, the citizens, make laws. And that is in the Arizona Constitution. It's not in all states' constitutions. We very particularly have that right. It says all power is inherent in the people in our Constitution. So these are, I think the way to wrap all these propositions up is, why would you vote to take away your own rights? And people seem to get that.
I get that. I was like, I think that pretty much sums it up. So everybody, when you're trying to understand these propositions, go to Kathy, because she explained it so succinctly that I feel sufficiently less confused right now. I will.
I don't know.
If I were in Arizona, I would go to, I'm sure on your website, you probably have helpful information there so that people can have a better understanding. Let's get to some of these audience questions really quickly. I love this one, actually. It's from CIF, the programmer, asks, why is Carrie Lake, who is running for governor, outperforming Blake Masters, who's running for Senate? They're both crazy. Why do you think Carrie Lake, I'll give this to you, Tim, why do you think Carrie Lake is outperforming?
It's almost like you went on 2 really, really bad dates, and you had to go and invite one again. And I think they are choosing to take Carrie Lake out. Blake Masters has been absolutely a trash panda. His campaign, I don't think he expected to get out of the primary. I think he was surprised that he got out of the primary. I think he was riding that crazy train, and I think even within that Republican right-wing party, they see he is just way out of touch with the Arizona voter. Kelly has done a great job of playing that middle, not being seen as far left, not being seen as far right, where I think Blake has just phoned it in, and people see that, and it's not resonating with the folks that are on that side of the aisle voting.
Trash panda is my new favorite thing.
I mean, I think it's just sort of a safe rule to live by, to never vote for anyone who considered the Unabomber a mentor, which Blake Masters does. Like Ted Kaczynski is one of my heroes. I really like the way the guy thought in those manifestos. So yeah, hopefully crazy doesn't win the day. We have another audience question. Corey Bean asks, which race is more impactful, the governor or Senate? What happens if Lake wins and Masters loses, or vice versa? Toss that to you, Kathy.
That is really a tough one, because I think the repercussions are either for the entire state or the entire country. And keeping control of the U.S. Senate, I think, is really critical to the next 2 years of Biden's presidency, but can we stand to have an entire state go down the drain? And a critical state, I mean, a swing state like Arizona. I mean, because of my perspective, I really, really want to capture at least either the governor's race or the state House or Senate. Any one of those three will stop a lot of bad things in Arizona. And but I don't know. I think it really depends on which way you're coming at that question from. That's a tough one.
I think that's a valid answer, though, because I mean, we're all in this together, and it's like I was like, I want to say the answer to that question. She was like, "We're gonna win them all. We're gonna win them both. Like they're both important races to win. That's all we're gonna say about that one."
Yeah, let's not imagine what that might look like if that
Exactly. Not gonna put it in the universe.
unless it motivates you to vote and then spend time thinking about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Do we have time for one more?
Let's give one more.
Yeah.
Let's see here. I think. Oh, I like this one. Adriana L 1989 asks. This is like a call to action, a motivating one. I work full time, but would like to help in some way in the evenings. She said she's already requested a mail-in ballot, so her vote is taken care of. What is the best thing for me to do now that we are so close to election day? And I think everyone should answer this one. Sorry, I'm going to put you all on the spot. It's very important. And you can talk about it in terms of your organization as well if you'd like to. So we'll start with Kathy. Go ahead.
Great. I would say get out the vote is the main thing that you can do at this point. It is so unbelievably critical. A lot of the groups that I work with are both phone banking, knocking doors, and doing all kinds of get out the vote activities, texting, etc. Civic Engagement Beyond Voting has phone banks every Sunday afternoon with a list that you can, or with a link that you can take and use all week long. And we are specifically tackling people who did not vote in 2018 but did vote in 2020, and we are specifically targeting women with an abortion message. So we are trying to make that as motivating as possible. So the link to join those phone banks is tinyurl.com/CEBV phone bank. And we will reel you in after that to a lot of our statewide activities.
Excellent. Love to hear it. Very important. And that was tiny URL. Everybody's going to have to rewind for that, but you'll get it. tiny URL dot something rewind. You'll get it. Let's go to Jean. If you could answer that question. And then also in terms of your organization, what are some calls to action?
Well, yeah, I'll share. Similarly, we have voter education phone banks happening twice a week. We have one going on right now while I'm here, actually. And those are to get the word out about our voter guide, which is one of our main resources right now. So if you're interested in our voter guide, you can go to eqaz.vote. I really think one of the best things anyone can do is to just have conversations with the people in your life. So whether that's your family, whether that's people at your work, whoever it is that you're talking to, ask about the things that you care about. It doesn't have to be the top line messages, it doesn't have to be a strategy. Just ask them if they voted. Ask them how they think about the election, what they're thinking about. Have those conversations and share the resources that you have.
Thank you for that. Fairly important, having the conversations. I know it's tough to have those conversations right now. I'm starting to text people I barely talk to, just to say, hey, what's going on?
Can't hurt. Yeah.
And Tim, if you could, your call to action for your organization, and what people can do between now and Election Day.
I think Jean and Kathy really summed up exactly what needs to happen when we're talking about activation of networks. It is uncomfortable to be at the bar and ask your friends, hey, have you all voted? If you have that tenacity and temerity, but that's kind of the critical point we're at. We need to start having these uncomfortable conversations within our own networks and really say, look, I want you to vote this way, but you gotta vote. And if you like to vote, maybe you don't vote for the people who don't want to count your vote.
I like your style, man.
Well, democracy is definitely a participation sport. And, there's people viewing, listening here that are outside of Arizona, and they can go to jointheunion.us to get involved and get connected to campaigns in Arizona. You can lend your time, your talents, and help affect these races.
Absolutely. Lisa, you can take us on out.
Yeah, I would encourage people also check out projectlincoln.us. The work that we do is not supported by any corporate contributions. We rely on this giant pro-democracy community that is coming together. So if you're able to help, we appreciate that. We also want to encourage you to go to the 3 organizations, these union, Jeff just mentioned, jointheunion.us. These folks are all members of that organization, that hub to help get volunteers out where they can do the most good. So the organization cebv.us, equalityarizona.org, and 1865pac.org. Please check all of them out. It's been wonderful having all 3 of you here with us tonight. So much good information and hope, which is so nice to hear. I do believe that we can do this if we all put in the work for the next 19 days. It's only 19 days.
19 days.
You can do anything for 19 days. So
it'll feel like 1,000.
So please stay focused, folks. Do what you can with any little bit of time that you have. Thank you, Maya May, for being here, Jeff Timmer for being here, and of course, Kathy Sigmund, Jeannie Woodbury, and Tim Castro. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. And thank all of you for tuning in for this town hall and for all of your support. We will see you again at the next town hall.